Cyprian gets further involved, Deidre gets better, and Rowan makes her way to New Orleans. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. And today I am recapping and reviewing episode number 2 of Mayfair Witches. As always, this is a spoiler review, so just be aware. Now, as we move into episode number 2, it's going to kick off actually going back in time. And what has happened is we are going to go back to Scotland, and it is 1681. We are introduced to Suzanne and her younger sister Florrie, and they are headed out to get Willowbark and Burdock for nightfall. It also seems like they're going to pick some other herbs and things like that. They're going to be interrupted by a man wearing a hat, and we can't really see who he is. We never do see his face. My assumption is that that might be Lasher hundreds of years ago, but it seems like Suzanne has done this before, and she ends up sending Florrie away. And then Suzanne ends up having the man lean against a tree, and she pleasures him. And with that, we're also going to see a murder of crows heading across the sky, capturing Suzanne's attention. Now, skip forward, we're going to modern day, and a distraught Rowan is sitting on the floor of Ellie's home, and she's going through a bunch of files, and she actually calls the adoption agency because she's wanting to talk to them, since her adopted mom and her had actually been, I guess, looking for her family, which we sort of know they weren't, because her mom, Ellie, she knew where Rowan came from. The woman on the other line at the adoption agency basically says that there's no way they could have handled the adoption because they didn't handle closed adoptions back then. Now we head on down, and Rowan is actually walking on the dock back to her boat at night, and she notices a mysterious black car that is driving around. It could be following her. She's really confused about the lies about the adoption. She doesn't really know what is going on. She ends up drunk and alone on her boat, and she's going to start to hear some whispers. We're then brought to Deidre, who is under a transparent sheet and listening to the same whispers as her daughter. Lasher reminds her that he told her that her life would one day change and that everything would be better, and that change is on the horizon as he has found her daughter. And of course, Deidre is going to want to see her, and in order to do that, she has to wake up and take control. And so on the front of the family house, on the front porch, she's going to wake up from her catatonic state. She's going to shock the maid who was feeding her as a single tear rolls down her cheek. Moving back to New Orleans, a hungover Rowan is going to find out that she is not on the surgical schedule for the hospital, and she's going to get very upset about that. Of course, at that same time, we're hearing on the radio that there was a body of a woman found in Phoenix that was charred. We don't really get any more info on that yet, but that was very important. She does notice the same black car outside her window, and she ends up back at the hospital talking to her boss. She thinks she's fine. He doesn't, because of her mother's death, so he sends her to be evaluated by the psych team. While Rowan is reluctant, she does go to Dr. Davis, and while she's at Dr. Davis, Cyprian is going to be checking out her boat. He sees some open drugs. He is going to be able to tell that something was going on. He's able to use his magic, whatever he does, to sort of see things that had happened. Meanwhile, Rowan is lying to Dr. Davis about things like her sleep habits and her anxiety, and she just wants to return to work. Dr. Davis is going to inquire about Daniel Limley's death. That's the guy in the cancer who had the cancer cancer treatment trial going, and Rowan gets very irritated about this, and Dr. Davis gets a sharp pain in her head and ends up having her nose bleed, and Rowan starts to hear whispers again. Freaked out, Rowan's going to run out of the session. Now back to Cyprian for just a second. One of the things he does see is Dr. Limley's death when he touches one of Rowan's bags. Rowan's going to head out to her car. She is not having a good day. It's covered with bird poop. There are birds everywhere. Crows are squawking in the trees above, and several of them are going to end up flying away, but then they drop dead onto her car. She wraps several of them up, puts them in her car, and is going to head on her way. What she doesn't know is Cyprian was watching all this from a distance, and he was taking pictures, and ultimately he followed her to the beach. At the beach, she buries the birds and pops a few pills, and as she lies down, she enters a dreamscape, that's what I'm going to call it, and she is in a green dress in New Orleans in front of the family mansion, and she is being called by a healthy Ellie. Now, Cyprian is going to talk on the phone to the agency he works for as he watches Rowan sleep, telling them basically that she needs to know who she is. They insist that she needs to be observed longer, especially since she had killed someone, and Cyprian reminds his co-worker that before he had been taken into this job, he was ready to kill as well. He's reminded that Ellie did her best for 30 years to keep her out of New Orleans, and if she finds out who she really is, she'll want to visit, and that apparently is not a good idea. Now, moving on, we're going to be in some type of foggy, trance-like, dreamlike state, and we meet up again with Lasher and Deidre. He tells her that it seems like she's waking up. There are some words she needs to remember, but that she just can't seem to remember them at that point in time. But she is going to wake up on the mansion's front porch instead, and the doctor, who I guess is helping her, notices that the medicine has worn off, and he actually gives her a fake shot. As he's giving her the shot, it's all being poured out. So with that, Deidre is going to pretend to still be in that trance-like state for the time being while she's getting her thoughts together. Rowan is eventually woken up on the beach by a late-night party. As she walks off, she sees the black car again, and she's going to confront Cyprian. He says he's not a threat, but as he grabs her hand, she's going to cause him to collapse. An ambulance is going to come and takes him to the hospital, and Rowan steals his phone and some files and discovers many of his pictures, and some of those are of a family in a New Orleans mansion. One is dated in 1990, and it appears to be Ellie outside the mansion. And there's a guy standing in the background that looks a lot like Lasher, but it's really hard to tell. Now, Cyprian is actually going to recover while he's in the ambulance. I don't know if he has some type of healing power, but he's going to escape and get out of there, and we're going to go back again to New Orleans. This is going to be a big deal because Deidre goes back into her childhood bedroom. She pulls the necklace of Lasher's out and puts it on, and Lasher appears, telling her that he's been communicating to Rowan in her dreams and that she is coming to them. We're going to see that Rowan has just boarded a flight to New Orleans, and then we get a very interesting scene where Deidre and Lasher are going to hook up, and somehow Rowan, who's asleep on the plane, is going to experience this connection as well. Back downstairs, Deidre overhears Carlotta and the maid talking about a meeting, and Deidre plans to crash it. She leaves the house, and the maid lets her go once she sees she's in her normal mental state, and she's very happy, the maid is, about that. An exhausted Rowan arrives at her hotel and had no clue she walked right past Carlotta in the lobby, who was talking with people at this meeting. We don't know what was going on with that. Deidre is going to relive her past as she walks into Uncle Cortland's house, and she gets a lot of memories of all the big parties that he threw, and just the fact that he was very lavish, and he is shocked to see her standing in his house and expresses regret about not trying to save her from her aunt, although who knows if he really had the chance. Now, here we know that Cortland is aware of Lasher because he asks Deidre if he is still around, and she actually lies to him and says that she doesn't know. At the hotel bar, Rowan is talking to a tour guide. She's trying to get some information on the mansion. After a little bit of bribery, the tour guide agrees to show her where the mansion is, and she also mentions that it's inhabited by witches. Deidre, back at Cortland's, is going to put on an old green dress. It's very similar to the one that Rowan had on in her earlier dream state, and Deidre says that any time she would wear a dress like that, her mother would find them and destroy them. She grabs her necklace and speaks the words that her mother taught her, and her head shoots back and her eyes turn white, and Lasher appears in Rowan's hotel room. So they're definitely connected. Deidre senses that Rowan is already in New Orleans and makes her way to the hotel. She actually is seeing through Lasher, and Lasher was standing outside of Rowan's shower, and Deidre actually saw the key to the room laying on the dresser. Now, we're going to get a conversation here between Cyprian and Rowan, and he's going to admit that he works for the Talamasca, and Ellie recruited him to protect her. They agree to meet and talk about the secrets at Rowan's hotel. Deidre is going to walk into the hotel, and she is looking like she is big and bad and back, and it's going to shock Carlotta, who is already there. Carlotta tries to convince her to go back to the house, that her daughter Rowan is dead, and that she's crazy if she thinks she's still alive. Deidre tells her that since she is awake, so is he, and Carlotta gets weak. Again, I'm interested to see what this relationship really is. Deidre enters the elevators, and the whispers start to return as she holds on tightly to her necklace. Now, what's going to have happened is Rowan has started downstairs to apparently go and meet Cyprian. So Rowan gets on the elevator and she heads down, and Deidre is heading up, and they're going to meet each other as Deidre is coming up on the elevator, and the two lock eyes, and Rowan knows that it's her mom, but something happens and Deidre's throat was slit by some invisible force, and she's bleeding out and collapses with Rowan screaming and holding her in her arms. And with that, episode 2 comes to an end. All right, now that we are finished with the recap, I do just want to throw out some thoughts and reactions about this episode, and there's positives and there's negatives here. I like the creepiness of this show. There's just enough to keep you wondering what's going on. It seems like it's going to be a little bit of a slow burner, though, and as long as we get a payoff in the end, that's not going to be a bad thing. Interview with the Vampire sort of worked that way. The first couple episodes were a little slow, well, at least slow burning, and then the payoff was big. So I'm hoping we're going to have something like that happen, because we're not really making any movement on who is Lasher, what's going on with Deidre. We did get her to wake up and basically head out to find Rowan. We get some information on Rowan, and so that's good. We get a little more information on Cyprian, and so, the information on the characters is still sort of limited. Now, along with that, I like the pacing, though. The story, I think, is told really well, and I'm enjoying the story. It's just got enough creepiness. It's sort of a mystery so far, and so that's working for it. And although I've got some little complaints, I'm really enjoying the show so far. I'm wondering how they're all connected, because you have the situation, especially when Deidre was hooking up with Lasher and Rowan apparently could feel all that. What is their powers? And that's another potential negative here is this is about witches. I mentioned it last time. I want to see the use of powers, not just this dreamscape that they seem to be able to go in, not Rowan being able to go in somebody's head and burst a blood vessel. I want to see some real witchy magic, and that's what's going to make this show or break it for me in the end. Also, our boy Harry Hamlin as Cortland, another nice scene with him, basically giving us a little background with his conversation with Deidre, and so I enjoyed that. Love Harry Hamlin and glad he's in this series. One big question for me, though, in this entire series is really what is going on with Carlotta. Carlotta, while she's been framed, I guess, as a good person, she's not seeming like a good person. She's seeming very antagonistic, and we're just not sure why yet. So she seems to be able to go sort of walk both sides of the line. So we'll see what happens with her. And just the last thing is the ending was shocking. We're getting ready to see Rowan and Deidre meet up as a family again, and they know each other, and then Deidre's throat gets cut. Who did it? Why did it happen? What's going on? Did they really kill Deidre? And I'm going to be honest, if they did, I'm going to be very upset about this, because this breaks one of my tenets, one of my rules of TVs and movies, is you don't bring somebody back from the dead or from a catatonic state if you're just going to kill them anyway. That's never made sense to me. It happens in a lot of movies and series, and just don't let her come back out of the catatonic state right in there, the dreamscapes and everything, and let her talk to Rowan that way and keep her alive. But there's no reason to go through the amount of this story that we went through today in episode 2 and then you kill her at the end. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And again, that's something I would mark a showdown for as well. Now, with all that, I am going to give this episode a grade, and I'm going to drop the grade to a B, and I'm doing that because of violation of my rule, and then also you have a situation where we just need to progress a little more. We need to see some more magic. These are witches. They need magic. Just a lot of little tiny things. Nothing that really affected my enjoyment of the episode. I really enjoyed it, and I am continuing to look forward to next week's episode. And so with that, I hope you all are too. And if you would do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below. Tell me your thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Mayfair Witches. And I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.